Why do car makers name their cars after horses? How fast can Ford assemble a car today? What are two iconic models that Ford made after the Model T? These are the questions we'll answer right now, and the story of the Ford Motor Company and how they changed the world. It's 1949, and Ford releases a car simply called Ford. It's the first all-new automobile introduced by any of the big three car companies after World War II. It's credited with saving Ford and bringing a new streamlined car. Fast forward to 1955. Bill Haley has Americans rocking around the clock. Drivers want something fun and sporty. Chevy's Corvette has been on the streets for a few years. Ford releases the Thunderbird. It's two-seat convertible with a V8 engine. It's not marketed as a sports car. It starts its own market segment, the personal luxury car. Henry II's greatest dream is to overtake the family's decade-long rival, General Motors. General Motors' main market is in medium-priced cars. Ford released the Edsel to compete in this market. Ford invests heavily in this car. They run a year-long teaser campaign. They say that Edsel will be the car of the future, but it's overhyped. When it launches, the Edsel is considered unattractive and overpriced. It's one of Ford's biggest failures. But strangely enough today, people are now starting to collect them. Ford recovers with the Mustang. Once again, Ford creates an entirely new class of cars. This is the pony class, affordable, sporty cars. Chevy follows with the Camaro, and Pontiac brings out the Firebird. The Mustang is also credited for inspiring the design of Toyota's Celica. It's 1966. Henry II decides it's time to break away from the old logo design. He hires the famous Paul Rand, who comes up with a radical new design. You've probably never seen it. That's because Henry II wisely decided to stick with the original Ford logo. The original logo was developed by Child Wills. He used his grandfather's stencil set, which was based on the style of writing taught when he and Henry Ford were at school. The blue oval made its appearance a little later in the 1927 Model A car. Now it's 1973, and the oil crisis hits. The increase in fuel prices results in some big changes in the American market. People can't afford to drive big cars. They need smaller cars that are more fuel efficient. Imports from Japan begin to flood the market. If you watched our video on how Toyota got so big, you'll have seen that the Japanese car makers faced the same problem back in Japan in the 1930s. They couldn't compete with Ford and General Motors, who had set up manufacturing companies there. Now the wheel is turned, and it's American cars that can't compete. But one thing history teaches us is that things change and then change again. Henry II doesn't like small cars, but he approves the development of the Pinto. He brashly predicts in 1978 that Ford will drive imports back into the sea. Well, he was wrong on that one. This does not happen, of course, but Pinto is a winner. The word Pinto is Spanish for spotted. It's not a breed, but used to describe a horse that has large patches of white or any other color. Now you're thinking, what's with all the horses? Did someone at Ford really like horses? First Mustang, then Pinto, and not forgetting Bronco. Well, it turns out the Mustang was named after World War II P-51 Mustang fighter plane. Of course, the fighter plane was named after the wild Mustang horse. Bronco is the word American cowboys used to describe an untrained horse. Ford brought out the Bronco in 1966, 2 years after the Mustang. Then there was the Pinto, which was marketed as a little carefree car. And much later, there was the Ford Ranger. It isn't just Ford. Dodge brought out the Colt in 1971. They also produced a Charger. Mitsubishi has Kuda, which means horse in Indonesian. There's the Brumby from Subaru. Hyundai has Equus, which means horse in Latin. And an earlier model called Pony. Even Rolls-Royce has one. The Camargue is a breed of horse in the south of France. So, what is with all the horse names? Well, the obvious reason is that horses replaced cars and transportation. So there was historic and nostalgic connection. But horses are also powerful and beautiful and move fast. So car makers use horse names to suggest their car has the same characteristics. Then, of course, horses represent freedom. So do cars. When Henry Ford made cars available to the ordinary man, he gave him the freedom to drive wherever he wanted. So long as he stuck to the road, of course. Back to Ford's story. Ford reports profits of $3.3 billion compared to GM's $2.95 billion. It's the first time since 1924 that Ford has beaten GM on the bottom line. Henry Ford II has the satisfaction of beating GM, even if only in a financial sense. A few years on, the economy is booming. Fuel prices are low. Ford acquires Jaguar cars and Aston Martin. Things begin to change at the beginning of the 21st century. The road becomes very bumpy for Ford. Bill Ford, the great-grandson of Henry Ford, becomes president. He's the first Ford to head the company since his uncle Henry Ford II retired in 1982. He must drive the company through a challenging landscape. Fuel prices have risen. Ford sales are declining. Stocks are falling. It'll take some huge changes to bring the company back to profitability. Ford unveils a plan called The Way Forward. It covers resizing the company, dropping unprofitable models. 14 factories close and 30,000 jobs are cut. They're also looking at hybrid technologies. Ford team up with Southern California Edison to examine the plug-in hybrids. Let's pause for a moment. Now, this is not Edison's company, even though it has his name. Thomas Edison allowed electric utility companies to use his patents as long as they also used his name. But there's a connection, and now you've got these two names working together. It's been a long road to electric cars for Ford. It started at the beginning of the 20th century with Henry and Edison working on electric technology. It's also at the very end of the century that Ford releases EV vehicles, the Ford Ranger and then later the Ford Focus Electric. While we're talking about technology, let's take a look at the evolution of the assembly line. The speed at which they can now make a car would have made Henry Ford a very happy man. It's now 1980 and robots are installed. The Fiesta is one of the first cars in the world where a robot injects its anti-corrosion sealant. By the early 21st century, hundreds of robots are fastening things together. By 2012, the robots get eyes. Well, not actual eyes, but they can detect positions of objects. Then robots get cup hands to install windshields and fenders on the Ford Escape. By 2010, high-tech dirt detection systems replaced the human eye when it came to fine imperfections. Modular assemblies are introduced to cater for increased vehicle options. Looking forward, 3D will probably play a huge role in the auto industry manufacturing. By 1913, the first moving assembly line enables Ford to produce a chassis in 1 hour 33 minutes. By 2013, 100 years later, Ford is making an entire car in 86 seconds. Now it's 2008 and the financial crisis hits America. Ford sells Jaguar and Land Rover to Tata Motors for $2.3 billion. 4 years later, things improve a bit. They buy a majority share in Argo AI, a self-driving car startup. Jim Hackett becomes CEO. He's been running the Ford Smart Mobility Program, a unit responsible for experimenting with car-sharing programs, self-driving ventures, and other programs. Fast forward to 2018, and there's a shocking announcement. Ford will discontinue passenger cars in the North American market for the next 4 years except for the Mustang and a new vehicle. This new vehicle is the Ford Fusion. It comes in gas, hybrid, and plug-in powertrain options. It has a lot of smart technology, including the Ford Pass Connect, which allows the car to go online as a hotspot. 90% of Ford's North American portfolio will be trucks, utilities, and commercial vehicles. It's been an eventful drive through the history of the car company that changed the world. Henry Ford left a legacy that shaped our society in so many ways. He introduced processes that changed not only the auto industry, but reached all manufacturing industries around the whole world. But most importantly, he achieved this vision of making cars available for every average American family. If you like this episode, please support us by sharing the video.